So every now and then, there's a game that comes along that you know you probably shouldn't buy. You've beta tested and maybe even alpha tested it. You've read articles and watched videos from countless others that share the same opinions. If you just play it with a friend or two, even the worst games can be a blast in that setting. The game is incomplete though, unpolished and unappealing in more ways than you care to admit to yourself or anyone else. But deep down, for some reason, you know you're going to play it despite all the warning signs. This is the Consummate Shill. Join me as we take a look into the thin shades of good, the overwhelming cesspool of bad, and everything in between in Tom Clancy's Ghost Recon Breakpoint. The game was developed by Ubisoft Paris and published by the parent company Ubisoft. It's available on PC, Xbox One, PlayStation 4, and in time, Google Stadia. Just to note, I played the PC version of the game, and the footage in this review was recorded from October 6th to October 12th, 2019. I played co-op with mainly one, sometimes two co-op partners throughout the entirety of the game on advanced difficulty. Before we get started, if you're new to the channel, I'm here to bring you honest and in-depth reviews of games to assist you in deciding where to spend your hard-earned money in the gaming world. I've actually spent significant time playing these games, and I do this because in this wasteland of watered-down, lifeless crap reviews, real fans of gaming deserve an unbiased and honest voice. So sit back, relax, and enjoy yourselves as we explore whether all the bad Breakpoint press is warranted, and why so many players flock to it, seemingly undeterred by all the media skepticism. We'll start with the story here, which is the topic I have the most mixed feelings about and possibly the most construed view of. The game's story is actually pretty good. Ubisoft pieces together and paints a picture of the game's villain in slow-burning fashion through a mixture of mysterious and sometimes just plain psychotic and brutal present-day events. A montage of personal flashbacks and experiences with the villain and first-hand accounts from supporting characters. It features a not-so-tangled and complex, but interesting web of characters to search for, speak with, help out, fight with, scheme with, and be betrayed by. To my pleasant surprise, the game really has a story that stands on its own 2 feet. They decided to cast Jon Bernthal as the game's star villain. If you're not familiar with him, he's most well known for his role in the early days of The Walking Dead, and more recently, the Punisher series on Netflix. Every aspect of this guy was seemingly directly imported into the game world, perfectly showcasing his nonverbals, mannerisms, every little subtle personal distinction right down to the way he walks is incredibly portrayed, and I give him a ton of credit for that. They truly did a wonderful job with him. However, and this is where the game started to go straight down the shitter for us, about 8 hours into our playthrough, we killed him. We thought this was probably a case of, we thought we killed him, but he's going to return at some point. Like, obviously, that's what's going to happen. But we played and played and played after this. Cutscene after cutscene, mission after mission. He was just gone. Aside from the occasional flashback cutscene that he was featured in, that was it. Upon researching the situation further, we discovered that the mission we completed at that 8-hour mark that killed Bernthal was in fact the mission that the entire web of story missions throughout the game leads into. And that mission is supposed to be the big culmination at the end of the campaign. They didn't have this mission progression gated behind what it should have been, and it effectively corrupted the entire main story for us from then on. After that point, every aspect of the game, aside from flashbacks, were completely void of Bernthal, even though there were several missions and cutscenes that he's involved with after the fact. And who cares, right? Why am I focusing so much on this and sweating losing him so early in the story? Guys, he's far and away the character that carries this story. Hell, he carried the game in many respects for us. 9 out of 10 other characters in this game are, I'm sorry to say, I'm not sorry to say, completely uninspired, forgettable trash, and oftentimes just downright annoying to interact with. If Bernthal was a 10 out of 10 as far as quality of a game character goes, the next characters in line, including the character you play, would maybe be a 5, and that's probably being generous. It's evident that the majority of their character and voice budget went straight into Bernthal's avatar, and I'm not faulting them for that because he's one of the better characters I've seen in a game, but the fact that they don't gate his death behind some type of later game progression just boggles my mind. I mean, I'm all for open world and allowing the player to make their own decisions, but this is just a careless oversight that simply can't be working as intended. And it's all the more apparent with the super stale, anticlimactic ending completely void of their star villain. I'm not sure if this was a mistake, if it's been patched by now, if it was possibly intended, I don't know. What I do know is they somehow found a way to take arguably the best part of this game and allow you to f*** it off with a single 3-minute mission inside 8 hours of what should easily be a 25 to 30 hour campaign.
You fucking worm. You cry to your daddy? That what you're gonna do? Every single time you fuck up, you put the blame on someone else, don't you? Anytime you're in trouble, you just wait for that daddy of yours to swoop on in, huh? Well, let me tell you something. Your daddy, he ain't here.
Now moving on to how your character is going to be structured. If you've played Wildlands, you're pretty much going to know what to expect from a mechanical standpoint. You're going to see most all of what made Wildlands combat, which was in my opinion really good, and expect to have a similar experience in Breakpoint with a few new features and systems sprinkled in. One of the larger new systems is the introduction of 4 classes: Assault, Panther, Sharpshooter, and Field Medic. Each class has bonus passives, class-specific utility items, and unique techniques at their disposal. One example would be the Sharpshooter's armor-piercing rounds technique, which loads 5 rounds of ammunition into your magazine and, you guessed it, pierces armor and does considerably more damage. The classes didn't blow me away, but they're unique enough to offer up some flavor when it comes to co-op party composition. Skill points will also be earned and available to spend in the skill tree, which is consistent across all classes. You'll receive a unique set of challenges for each class and earn rewards by completing these. You can play any class at any time, but switching between classes will require resting at the bivouac to make the adjustment. Bivouacs are a new feature that are hidden makeshift camps you'll discover throughout the world and allow for fast travel and offer you several utilities, including spawning vehicles, a selection of temporary buffs, the ability to buy and sell equipment, and the aforementioned class switching. Bivouacs can be easily identified while exploring the world by a thin trail of smoke emitting from them, and there are tons of these out there. Injuries are also a new addition that work almost like a debuff system. If you take too many shots to a certain extremity, get hit with explosives, fall off a ledge, something like that, you'll obtain an injury, which, for example, a leg injury. Your movement speed will be slowed, and depending on the leg, you'll stagger and limp to that side until you heal the injury. Some light injuries can be healed quickly with a syringe, while other more serious injuries will require the use of a bandage, which has significantly longer activation time. Bandaging in combat usually isn't feasible, so fighting through the injuries is sometimes required. Injuries definitely add an interesting touch to the combat. All of these new features do well to accentuate and build on what Wildlands started, and for me, they're all pretty welcome additions. As far as combat goes in a more direct sense, the gunplay is just as good as it's always been. Nothing really more to say about it. I really did enjoy the Wildlands combat, and this one, sort of carries on where that one left off. There's a slew of new weapons and attachments on offer, along with a large familiar returning cast. Now, one problem for me: all the weapon types feel very different from one another. However, each weapon within these categories feel, for me, just way too similar. Aside from fire rate, it seemed to me like all the assault rifles felt the same, all the submachine guns felt the same, and on down the line. There really isn't enough care taken to make each weapon feel unique, and this was true for me in Wildlands as well to a point. I'm not sure if others feel the same way about this, it's just an observation I had. The cover system in these games has always been one I've had issues with. Somehow, Breakpoint might feel worse than Wildlands did in this respect. They need to make a decision whether they want this to be a cover shooter or not. For me, there's no in between. Either give me a button to enter and exit cover, or don't, and give me the peek and lean functionality. Wildlands and Breakpoint alike both chose the worst of both worlds with this system. No button to enter and exit cover, and no lean functions. Coupled with this horrifically clunky context system to enter cover, it's just really bad, and they need to take a stance either way on it. The amount of times I've went into or exited cover inadvertently has to be a shocking number. I just don't care for the system here at all. Speaking of cover systems, The Division, just as a side thought here, they really started to steer this game in that direction in terms of the looting and gear system. The amount of loot in this game has reached an out-of-control level, and the addition of a gear score system that really doesn't do much for the game isn't really a welcome change for me. And honestly, I didn't feel any more powerful at 150 gear score than I did at 50 gear score, and that's a problem. This game doesn't really lend itself to a system like this, and I'm not sure why they went this route. They really should have focused more on improving the already intuitive and pretty good Wildlands gear structure. You can damn near just put this game in the looter-shooter category now. Wildlands and The Division are great games in their own right, but they need to keep the two separate. Seeing some of these genre-defining systems bleeding through between Ubisoft's games really isn't a healthy sign. Unfortunately, a common theme throughout this review will be wondering why Ubisoft seems to force reinventing the wheel, as opposed to building on things that were already working well. Survival elements were also touted prior to release and haven't been delivered really in any form. It never feels like a survival game or any kind of struggle to survive, nothing like that. The addition of eating and drinking has absolutely nothing to do with survival mechanically. Water replenishes the minuscule loss of stamina from overexertion, and food just gives you small buffs. The only mechanic in any way synonymous with survival would be the injury and bandaging system, I guess, but even that's a stretch. The quality and variety of vehicles in Breakpoint is incredible. You come across enough different types of civilian vehicles, and they're placed cleverly enough that you get the feeling of realism, and it doesn't seem like you're seeing the same cars and trucks over and over again like some games. The selection of military vehicles is vast as well, but some do look sort of similar to one another. I think that could be just the nature of military automobiles, though. Motorcycles were the only type I didn't care for. They don't sound quite right either, and they handle worse than they sound. Also, it seems like there's 100 different types of cars, trucks, helicopters, boats, but only 2 types of bikes. It's just strange. And moving on, as far as enemies go, there's a fair amount of variety here too. Nothing about the human enemies blew me away, but I don't have anything to complain about either. If I had to nitpick, the rogue ghosts or hunters are a little too costumey for me. The blacked out outfits, masks, capes, it was a little much. They certainly are imposing foes though. The addition of all the drones and robotic enemies go well with the story and offer new sets of challenges. Some of the tanks are ridiculously hard to kill without help and the right party composition. There are also these super spastic attack drones that are a real pain in the ass. They're hard to hit and they hit very hard. One gripe on the enemies, the AI isn't well done in some respects. You know, shooting, cover, and movement-wise, they're fine. No real issues with that, but oftentimes, you can just hunker down in one spot with a bottleneck, and enemies will just march on through the crossfire, corpse-riddled massacre zone you've created. It seems like once this trend starts, they don't stop coming until they've all been butchered in trivial fashion. This kind of thing will bore you to death, and it happens more often than you'd think. One more thing to note here on the game's world, it's entirely a fantasy setting this time around, whereas Wildlands was set in an adaptation of Bolivia. Truly, I'm fine with the fantasy world. They did a very good job designing it, and the whole secret island, wildly advanced technological world is more at home in a fabricated landscape anyway. Sometimes, however, I feel this tends to work against the game, especially with all the drones and such. I found myself thinking it looked more like a Michael Bay movie than a tactical ghost game much of the time. So yeah, the game world. We'll just move on to graphics and sound. This game looks absolutely incredible. I found the sweet spot for my system was 1440p high details, and the game just looks stunning and runs like a dream. It's optimized very well, and one of the best examples of this is how damn smooth, while at the same time being extremely detailed, your helicopter rides are. The kind of draw distance they've presented here while still maintaining great frame rates and details really is an accomplishment. The world is rife with thick, impressive-looking vegetation that gets beautifully displaced by your character's movement. The water is also done very well, and whether it's a boat cutting through it or your character sloshing along, the water is realistically affected by displacement as well. The way the environment is impacted overall by your movements and actions is really high-quality stuff, and this is what we should get with AAA titles. Prone camouflage is also a new feature in the game that looks very good graphically, and yet another way to interact with the terrain. It's pretty simple. You hit the deck, press a button to use dirt and mud to blend in with the surrounding area. The camo even stays applied for a limited time after getting up, which is also a nice touch. You'll have to use this technique to avoid being detected by surveillance drones flying overhead randomly as well, and that adds a cool bit of immersion to the world. I was really surprised at how much I liked this small feature. Explosions, whether it be from a grenade, vehicle blowing up, helicopter crashing and burning, they're all great. The only thing truly lacking in my eyes are the models for some of these characters. As I mentioned before, Bernthal is done so well, it makes many of these other characters look laughably poor in comparison. A little more care and time taken with less prevalent members of the cast would have gone a long way. As far as sound goes, it's just as high caliber as the graphics are. The weapons sound great up close and from afar, and the sound of the explosions is even better than how they look. Vehicles and most other common sound effects are great as well, and all come together to really make a nice sounding environment. The ambient noise is good too. Things like the weather and the creatures you hear out in the world really accentuate the great visuals. Though, one sound I could do without hearing ever again is the grunting and grumbling as you're descending down hills or banks. This is awful and just flat out annoying, especially after the 200th grunting and grumbling beatbox you hear going down a hill in this game. They should definitely look into tweaking this. The voice acting is hit or miss with the characters too, and the voice quality is often parallel with the character model's graphic quality. A trend here is good models get good voice, bad models get bad voice. Overall though, the graphics and sound were AAA quality for the most part, especially when it comes to interacting with the environment and combat.
Yes.
Now the quests in this game are pretty good at face value. There's actually interesting things going on, and for the most part they aren't just cookie cutter, gather this or kill that kind of stuff. The variety seems nice at first. However, they really went for quantity over quality because there's tons of shit to do in this game, and it's good for the first handful of hours, but after that, quests become really just a hodgepodge of repetitive, boring, mundane tasks. This just goes for the side and faction quests because, like I said, if done in a proper chronological order, the main story questline is extremely good. Speaking of faction quests, these work kind of like daily quests that you would see in an MMO, and completing them gives you points toward your Battle Pass progression. The Battle Pass is free to everyone and offers numerous rewards for each tier. The other type of quest is intel gathering. You'll get information from an NPC, whether it be a friendly or a hostile interrogation, or you'll gather intel from documents, computers, etc. Usually an intel quest will have 2 to 4 or so parts to it, and once you acquire all those pieces of intel, you sort of piece them all together into one thought by selecting Resolve. It's done okay, except for when you finish off one of these things with intel from a cutscene. The cutscene will pause right in the middle, make you click the Resolve button, then go straight back into the cutscene. Terrible. Just an unintuitive and unnecessary mechanic. One last thing I'll mention on questing is the user interface for organizing and tracking quests is horrendous. There's no real rhyme or reason to how it's laid out, and simply finding the quest you're looking for can be a chore. On the topic of interface, the UI and menus as a whole are disturbingly atrocious, for the most part. The map is done really well actually, but that's about it. The skill point screen as well as the quest area can't even be zoomed out. They require like 3 to 4 full motion click and drags to navigate from one side to the other. I mean, who the fuck designed this? One thing I can guarantee is whatever team was responsible for the interface and menus clearly do not play PC games. Now, obviously, there are bugs in this game. I could do another entire video discussing the numerous bugs more in depth, but it's just not necessary. Suffice it to say, the game is unfortunately riddled with bugs, and it's a shame. Admittedly, most are insignificant enough to not affect your playthrough or progress in any way, but as I mentioned with the main story earlier, some of these bugs just completely ruin parts of the game in a huge way. Bugs of note would be the very first thing you see in the game. The character creation screen, right off the bat in the first minute, I got an issue where the audio that's supposed to be in the cutscene after you finish character customization, it just started running. Once my character was finished, I went through the exact same audio, but this time along with the cutscene. This was definitely some foreshadowing into what we would experience in the coming days. Problems with the setting that switches between over-the-shoulder and aiming down sights. The game would randomly decide to switch me from right-click aim down sights over to right-click shoulder aiming. This can easily be toggled back in the options, but it was a recurring, super annoying issue, and we kept having to deal with it. After collapsing a bivouac, we would sometimes get stuck at the campfire and be unable to move. Sometimes fast traveling to a party member would fix it, but sometimes it also required a restart. Characters floating outside helicopters was a common occurrence. If I had to put a number on it, I'd say probably 1 in 3 times we were in a helicopter this happened in some form or another. You have the famous testicle rubbing revives. The real revive animation, it was fine, but this is what a revive looked like, I would say roughly half the time. Sometimes, after a fast travel to a teammate, you would fall through the world and eventually you would just die. And whatever the fuck this is... And guys, these are just instances of bugs that were easy to find and label in my recorded footage for this review. This only scratches the surface of the mess of technical issues and eyesores this game has. I really don't have much else to say about Breakpoint. If you've played Wildlands, you've played this game. It's almost like someone took Wildlands, dropped it into a different world setting, nuked half the game code, added a bunch of unnecessary, out-of-place bullshit, and called it Breakpoint. Now, if you just took the first part of the last statement I made, just placing Wildlands in a different setting with a more interesting story and working to accentuate the already great game that it was, then they would have had something great here. I'm sure of it. I didn't even mention microtransactions. I'm not going to get too into everyone's microtransaction woes in this game. In short, there are a shitload of microtransactions. Pretty much anything you can earn in the game, you can buy with dollars and cents. You could even buy skill points in the in-game store, for Christ's sake, but thankfully they quickly patched that out due to massive public outcry. Listen, once again, I don't care about microtransactions in non-competitive games. I really don't. I couldn't care less about someone who wants to ruin a game for themselves by paying for what you're supposed to play the game for. If you don't like microtransactions, don't buy them, and if it's a personal problem with Ubisoft for having so damn many, just don't buy the game. If you don't approve of what these developers are doing with these microtransactions and this, extra, crazy monetization, don't support the developers. It's as simple as that. Do not buy their games. So, the price. This game is $60 retail. There is no way in hell I would pay $60 for this game, let alone whatever they're asking for the other overpriced premium or ultimate bonus versions of the game they're selling. Therefore, there's no way I could recommend anyone else pay full price for this game, especially in the state it's currently in. Fortunately for me, Breakpoint is available as part of Ubisoft's Uplay Plus subscription, which is $15 a month. I can say with confidence, it was worth it to me to pay $15 to play through this campaign with some friends in co-op. And if you're dying to give it a shot, I recommend you take this route, at least initially. Otherwise, I would just wait and keep up with the news and public opinion on the state of the game and make your purchase when they decide to finish their product. Breakpoint is just a classic case of what you're seeing in a lot of these big games these days. Just a sad story of what could have been. So much potential here was just wasted, thrown down the shitter by Ubisoft's perpetual need to push games to release far too quickly. Now make no mistake, I did have a good bit of fun playing this game in co-op with my friends. So, was it fun? Absolutely, it was fun. If you're in the right situation, co-op with friends. Was it a good game? That is a completely different question. No, it was not a good game. It's a mess of a game that probably shouldn't have been released until, I would guess, at minimum, the first or second quarter of 2020. Guys, there is a good game under all of this broken content and preposterous bullshit. I know there is. The game has good bones. It really does. The developers just needed to accept the fact that it was not finished and take the time to give it the kind of polish and care that a big budget AAA title and their customers deserve. So that's all I have for you today. I hope you enjoyed the review and hopefully you learned something about Tom Clancy's Ghost Recon Breakpoint. If you guys enjoyed the review, do me a favor and hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more content like this. Ring the notification bell to be alerted when a new video is released and stay up to date and informed. And really make sure your gaming budget is spent on quality games worthy of your hard-earned money. Also, let me know what you thought about this review in the comments and what games you'd like to see me do in the future. Thanks for watching.